Now, in our legal hour today, we focus on why and how women can seek legal help, and specifically the crucial role that the Women's Legal Centre plays in defending and advancing women's rights in South Africa. Now, in 2014, the WLC made headlines with the case WLC Trust v versus the President of the Republic of South Africa and others, a landmark moment for women's justice, especially for Muslim women whose rights in divorce, maintenance and inheritance have long been in the spotlight. Now, today we are joined by Khensani Motileni, Attorney Equality in Relationships program from the Women's Legal Centre, to unpack what this case means, what the Divorce Amendment Act entails, and how women across the country can access support when facing legal challenges. Good afternoon, and thanks so much for your time. Thanks for being here.
Afternoon to you and your listeners. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Are you well?
I'm good, thank you.
That's perfect. Now, let's start with the basics. For listeners who may not know, what is the Women's Legal Centre, and also what kind of work you do in order to support women across South Africa? Tell us a bit about it.
Okay, so the Women's Legal Centre is an African feminist law clinic. We are based in Cape Town, and we have 5 focus areas. We have a legal advice unit, which is, well, some could call it a law clinic, which operates Monday to Friday. This is where we give women who walk in free legal advice and possible legal representation and referral. Then we have a focus area called Equality in Relationships, which the recognition of Muslim marriages case was done under. We have the right for women to live in a society that is free from violence. We have the right for women to work in favorable working conditions, as well as sexual reproductive health rights. So those are the main focus areas of the Women's Legal Centre, and we do this through strategic litigation, we do it through research, we do it also through education and training. So that's a bit about the Women's Legal Centre.
Sounds like a lot. Sounds like a lot.
It is a lot.
Now, the Women's Legal Centre launched the case Women's Legal Centre Trust versus the President of South Africa and others in 2014. What led to this case being brought before the court?
So what had happened was that when the Women's Legal Centre opened its doors in the year 1999, I was actually in grade 1. So when the organization opened its doors, it was inundated with queries from Muslim women from different walks of life. And the Women's Legal Centre from 1999 to the year 2014, it had taken a piecemeal approach, right? So a piecemeal approach is when a woman walks in and says, you know what, my husband is trying to evict me. What are my rights? So would then take that to court. Oh, my husband died in a motor vehicle accident. Do I have rights to inherit for loss of support? So we were doing all these different cases for between 1999 and 2014. Then we saw that actually there is a need for us to bring a broader systemic challenge and to call on the president, right, more importantly, to ensure that Muslim marriages are recognized the very same way customary marriages are recognized, to ensure that vulnerable women in society are protected. And I must mention that before we launched the case, we had close to 800 women approaching us. And the profile of these women, which can actually be found in the court papers, is that these women were about 60 years old. They had never worked a day in their lives. They were homemakers, right? They did not own any assets. Some of them got married at the age of 18, fresh from matric. And it was very, very important for us to highlight this reality to the courts, because Muslim marriages in their nature are out of community of property. Right. So it was very important for us to highlight that, just to show that the unpaid care work does not go unnoticed, right? Because usually society thinks because you're a homemaker, they think that, you know, anyone can do it, right? But it's not anyone can do it kind of a situation, because you are taking care of the home, your husband is in a position to actually grow and further his business, right? And in some instances, these women actually work for their husbands. So they actually contribute to the growth of the business and the wealth of the family.
100%.
But upon divorce, then they are not given anything.
Which just feels completely unfair.
Definitely. So that is the main reason why.
If you have just joined us, this is Radio 786 and 100.4 FM. The FYI shows Legal Hour today looks at the Equality in Relationships program that Attorney Khensani Motileni is, of course, part of. It is at the Women's Legal Centre, and we are particularly focusing on the case that, of course, was the Legal Centre versus the President of South Africa and others in 2014. Now, tell us more about the lived experiences and stories of women who approached the centre for assistance. What patterns or injustices did you see that pushed for the legal action?
So the first one is the age, obviously, right? Who's going to hire you at 60 years old without prior education?
Yeah.
So that was the profile of the women that walked through our door. So it was the age was a big thing. These women were not educated. Like, you need resources for you to get education. They did not have these resources, for example, right? These women were left destitute with their children, right? And one of the cases that we did before we launched this big case was an eviction matter in Goodwood, where a husband wanted to evict his first wife, so the first wife and the children, so that him and the second wife can live in the property without any issues, right? So those were the kind of problems that women were walking in to say that I will be faced with eviction and I will be left destitute and I have young children that I need to raise. So that is the profile of the women that actually came into our offices, and that's why the legal team at the time found that it was actually very important to actually just do a frontal challenge and let's bring more a systemic challenge and actually fight for this recognition. Because I mean, it started way before 2014, but from 2014 we only reached the Constitutional Court in 2021, and we finally got judgment in June 2022, right? So it's always been like a work in progress, because also the wheel of justice turns very, very slow. So I think it's also just very important to also just highlight that we had to go through the Western Cape High Court. Once we won, we went to the Supreme Court of Appeals, then we ended up at the Constitutional Court. So it's been a long journey, and because also at the time there were other individual matters by other Muslim women that were filed in the Western Cape High Court. The court then took a stance that all the other small cases, they should be consolidated together with this one. Yes, because essentially everyone was seeking the same, and the relief that everybody sought across the board was the recognition of Muslim marriages. All the women that approached the court, and I must mention that the women that approached the court are women with resources, are women that actually have resources. So we represented the women that did not have access to money, because high court litigation is very expensive, right? And also it takes time, right? So it requires you to also be patient, which is, it's time that some women don't have. If you had to choose between going to court and feeding your children, you choose feeding the children,
Certainly.
right? So that's why it was very, very important for us to actually step in and say it's time for recognition.
Now, many people may not fully understand what the case aimed to achieve. In simple terms, what was the main issue at the heart of the legal battle?
So the heart of the issue was recognition, right? And when we have recognition, it means that we will have a legal framework, right, which will have legal consequences, right? So if you're married in terms of the Marriage Act or the Customary Marriage Act, what then happens that as soon as you are divorced, legal consequences flow from that, where you know exactly what happens. But with women in Muslim marriages, they approach this from a religious perspective, right? So it was not a situation where the court is actually involved. So we wanted to give women a chance, to institute divorce proceedings in a court and be able to get a remedy that actually addresses what they actually want at the termination. And it was also just very important just to reaffirm women's position in society and a reaffirmation that we have a constitution, but this constitution also is there for you and to protect you and your family as well. It shouldn't just be Khensani who's in a customary marriage who's protected, but what about Moniba in a Muslim marriage? Does she have equal protection or not? And I mean, it was quite appalling that the state did not have the political will to actually move this forward, because prior to the time in the year 2000, there was a Muslim marriage bill, right? They had consultations all the way to the year 2010. And because because the MJC and the state were not reaching consensus, that's why it ended up being abandoned, because it was, oh no, you're infringing on religious freedom, but what about the protection of people? But they were able to do it with customary marriages, I mean, majority of female Islamic scholars said, but you can use the same blueprint as you did with recognition of customary marriages, because customary marriages also allow for polygamous marriages. So we don't understand when you're saying that we can't do this, right? So for us, it was just very, very important to just push the boundaries just a tad bit, just to ensure that women in religious marriages are also protected, which is something that is so, so important. Because if you're looking at the judgment, one of the last parts of the order, it says that because Muslim marriages are out of community of property in their nature, you can ask the court to make what we call a just and equitable distribution of assets. So you are then able to do that. Yes, you'll be at the court's mercy because you don't know if they'll give you 40% or 10% or 50% of the assets, but the court has that opportunity. So it means that you need to put everything on paper in order for the court to actually recognize that you deserve the slice of the cake. And that is something that's important. Also, not forgetting children as well, right? Now children, if your parents institute divorce proceedings, the family advocate can intervene when it comes to care and contact and custody issues, right? But before this case, the same opportunities and the safeguards were not afforded to children born from Muslim marriages.
Now, I know that this has been an ongoing battle for very long, and there's been many people other than the Women's Legal Center who's also fought kind of for the same recognition for Muslim marriages. But I always wonder, why was it such a difficult decision to make for the courts in terms of just seeing that recognition gets passed?
I mean,
what exactly was the reasoning?
So there isn't, when you look at judgments, right, before the recognition of Muslim marriages, when individual women approach the courts, they would get that relief and say, oh, okay, yes, you can be recognized for purposes of loss of support if your husband passes away from a car accident, right? Okay. Because the legislation was written in a way that actually excluded Muslim marriages, right? So women were not sure. My husband was the breadwinner. He died in a car accident. What do I do? Where do I go? Will I be recognized? So these women who approach the court for all these different issues, even like will inheritances and, the courts recognize the need, right? But no one actually was brave enough to actually say, we need a more serious and broader systemic challenge. So that's why we got tired of the piecemeal approach, and it was just important for us to file the broader public interest case at the time, to just ensure that we settle the matter once and for all, and that is what actually happened with the case.
Our lines are open in 0216991786 or 0786101112, and I have in studio with me Attorney Khensani Motileni, and she's from the Women's Legal Center. We're talking about the case that, of course, was between the Women's Legal Center versus the President of the Republic of South Africa and also others. And this is a landmark moment for women's justice, especially for Muslim women whose right in divorce, maintenance and inheritance have long been in the spotlight. Now, if we can maybe just briefly speak about how the lack of recognition for Muslim marriages under South African law affected women, particularly in situations such as divorce, maintenance, or inheritance.
Okay, so because the nature of the marriage is out of community of property, and through collaborations that we've had with partners, for example, Aisha Roeke and the Muslim Family Law Hub, they've also unpacked that the issue is that women don't usually negotiate when they enter into marriages, right? Some women have that confidence and can negotiate to say, I need a car in my name, I need a house in my name, but not everybody has the same bargaining power, right, to do that. And in some instances, you just arrive as an 18-year-old major who just got married, you're excited to build your life, and you are then, you are then left destitute when your husband then decides that they want to actually end the marriage. And The other thing that we saw was that, for example, on our social media, you'll see we have an educational video where we interviewed one of our clients, Sumaya Bester. Sumaya Bester approached the institution several times. It took them 7 years for her fasakh to be granted, right? And for it to be granted 7 years later, it is because one of the officials working at the institution where she was going all the time, he saw her struggle. And that's when he said, yeah, maybe, let's do something. Let us grant this woman her wish. But it's one of those things that, why is it that we don't believe women when they say that they would like to step out of the relationship, right? Or their marriages for that matter. And for us, that is really, really concerning, that it cannot take 7 years for you to have your fasakh to be granted, whereas your husband has abandoned you and your 6 children. Because Ms. Bester details the story where she said she had 6 minor children, she was unemployed, and her husband abandoned her. And every time she went to get a religious divorce, she was told, oh no, we're waiting for your husband. The husband never arrived. And she had to keep going up and down, up and down, up and down. So for us, that's why this case is so important. It's because of stories of like Sumaya Bester, for example, that actually show us that why it's necessary to actually have legal certainty when it comes to certain issues.
Now, let's unpack the Divorce Amendment Act. What exactly does it change, and how does it really impact Muslim women's rights in marriage and in divorce?
Okay, so with the Divorce Amendment Act, so the amendment is that it now has the definition for divorce includes Muslim marriages, right? And throughout it includes where there's children, it obviously includes children that were born from marriages of like Muslim marriage, for example. And then the other thing is that because the marriage is out of community of property, yes, but you do have the opportunity to ask the court to say that, can I please get a just and equitable distribution of the assets that we have acquired during the marriage period. And the other one is that you also now can also ask for a forfeiture of benefits, right? So a forfeiture of benefits is maybe, for example, if your husband was adulterous, he was having an affair, you are able to put those facts to the court to say that in actual fact, he does not deserve to get anything because this is what he did. This is the impact of his actions on the family. Even men that just go and get themselves into debt unnecessarily and recklessly, right? So it's like in the child maintenance court, the trend that we see, it's men resigning from their jobs, having access to their pension, and then squandering it and then saying, oh, I'm unemployed, right? So the forfeiture of benefits actually assists with that. And the nice thing is that because you are able to approach the court, you can actually interdict resources, right? You can actually write to your husband's pension and say that we are currently involved in divorce proceedings. We would like you to not process any requests until this is done. So this is something that's also very, very important. So it then allows women to have more recognition and for them to actually have a bargaining power and a seat at the table to say that you got yourself into debt, you are recklessly spending, therefore the court should not even allocate any money to you because the little that you have, you might actually misuse it because you also have children that require support from you as well. So you are actually able to get that. You are also able to ask for spousal support, right? Where especially for women that have never worked outside of being homemakers, they can actually ask the court for spousal maintenance. So with spousal maintenance, the court will assess the kind of life that you lived with your husband. If you're staying in the Bishop's Court, for example, you should still be in a position to live the quality of life that you lived before, even at the end of the marriage, right? So that's also something that's also very important. But with spousal maintenance, we know that it ends when the woman remarries or when she passes away. So it's not like a indefinite, yes. It's not an indefinite clause. It will end when the woman remarries, but it's also, this is something that the parties need to actually agree on. It's very, very important. And then obviously the children as well. So children children will be fully taken into account to ensure that the best interest of the child are put first before everyone, to ensure that there's justice for everyone. Yeah.
I am joined by Khensani Motileni, attorney in the Equality and Relationships Program from the Women's Legal Centre, and she's unpacking what the case meant and also what the Divorce Amendment Act entails and how women across the country can access support when facing legal challenges. Now, we are due for the break, and inshallah after the break we will continue. And also a reminder that if you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to WhatsApp your comments to 0786 10 11 12. This is the FYI show and you are listening to the legal segment. Stay tuned.
Radio 786. Hear the difference.
Evenings on Radio 786 are powered by Insight, Reflection and Real Conversation. It's Evening Insight Monday to Thursday from 6 to 9 p.m. and Fridays from 5 to 8 p.m. Community Finances gives you the tools for smarter living.
Conventional life cover is basically where you pay your premiums over to the company,
Yes.
the insurance company,
Yeah.
and they take that money and they invest it. And they invest it in anything.
And Toned On Evening Insight keeps you focused on health and wellness.
You don't really have the same amount of mobility. You can't do the same things you were. Now, we attribute that to time. But in reality, a sarcopenia is the result because time is slowly stripping you of your muscles.
Evening Insight, the conversations that matter, the insight you need, only on Radio 786 100.4 FM.
Radio 786. Hear the difference.
This is Radio 786 broadcasting 100.4 FM. I'm Zainab Bean and I am in conversation with Khensani Motileni, attorney in Equality in Relationships Program from the Women's Legal Centre. She is here in studio today to unpack what this case means, and that is the case that was in 2014 when the Women's Legal Centre made headlines with the case between Women's Legal Centre Trust versus the President of the Republic of South Africa and others, and this a landmark moment for women's justice, especially for Muslim women, and that is of course the rights in divorce, maintenance and inheritance that has long been under the spotlight. However, I think it's important to note and to understand that this is only in matters of Islamic or Muslim divorce cases and not necessarily Muslim marriages per se, and that is still an ongoing battle. And so during the break we was talking about one of the incidences I particularly remember, a neighbor of ours who unfortunately her husband passed away suddenly, and because his name was as he was the person that was kind of as the homeowner, and although she worked for this particular same house, she ended up losing everything, and besides her losing her husband, she also ended up losing her home, and it was a real battle getting back onto her feet. The point is really that even on the death certificate, I remember it said that he was never married. And so I think an important point here, Khensani, is the importance of registering one's marriage.
Yes, most definitely. That is why it's so important to register your marriage. However, I must just say that currently the Department of Home Affairs is wrapping up the public hearings on the marriage bill. So with the Constitutional Court order, Home Affairs, they were given 2 years to remedy, either come up with a new piece of legislation that recognizes Muslim marriages or amend existing legislation. Then they took the approach of actually consolidating all marriages in South Africa and having it under one umbrella with the inclusion of Muslim marriages as well. However, time was not on their side. So in May last year, on the 2nd of May last year, the Speaker of Parliament filed an urgent application to the Constitutional Court asking the Constitutional Court for an extension, right? So at that point, we had already seen what the marriage bill actually looks like. We had also sent in our thoughts, what we think and what we think would be the best way and approach. We did not oppose the Speaker's application. And then the Constitutional Court said, okay, because there were elections that were happening and Parliament would be dissolved in like about 2 to 3 weeks' time at that time, it was just very important it was in the interest of justice to ensure that Home Affairs actually unpacks and embarks on a public participation process to ensure that everyone is aware about this and everybody can share their thoughts. So even last week, the Portfolio Committee on Home Affairs was in Khayelitsha, was in Bel Air. They were with communities trying to understand how do you think this will actually impact you. So the legislation is still on the way. Their deadline is next year, June. So we're just hoping that by next year, June, we would actually have a marriage act that recognizes Muslim marriages. And at that recognition, it then means that when you get married in terms of Islamic rights, you can also then go to Home Affairs and register your Muslim marriage. And after registering your Muslim marriage, you'll be added into the National Population Register. And then that is how then if they get a death certificate, it will then reflect the fact that they were married, right? But because of non-recognition at this point,
there's no registration.
But also, I must actually add that with customary marriages, most of the men are very reluctant on registering their customary marriages, and they then end up leaving their women in the rural areas and then secretly getting into alternative marriages and then registering that marriage in terms of the Marriage Act. Right? And then they then come with the marriage certificate and say, no, but I'm married to someone else now. I'm no longer married to you, right? So recognition is very, very important because it then helps us deal with men that actually weaponize the power that they think they actually have. So it's very, very important. And also, I think the other most important thing to note is that with customary marriages, non-registration of a customary marriage does not invalidate the actual marriage. So women are still able to approach Home Affairs or the Master's Office once their husband has died to say that yes, we did get married, we have complied with all the the cultural rituals and everything. Then you get recognition. Then they are then able to recognize you for purposes of inheriting, and then you are then listed as the surviving spouse. So we are hoping that even when we get the marriage bill, it will actually allow like the further interrogation that should a man pass away without registering their Muslim marriage, these women can still go to Home Affairs or can still go to the Master's Office and have an inquiry done for them to then be recognized as the surviving spouse. So that is very, very important for us.
100%. Now, we have two questions that came through via our WhatsApp line. The one says, are these rules the same if the roles were reversed? Now, we know that's a women's legal center. This, I'm assuming, is a male. He's asking, as in, if the husband is a stay-at-home dad and the wife is a professional or of good standing, meaning monetary-wise, etc., does the same rules apply for the male?
Yes, most definitely. The same rule applies to everyone, right? Recognition is for everyone. Our emphasis is just women because, you know, we're a feminist organization and we only cater to women and their diversity. So that's why we have a big emphasis on women. But the law protects everyone, and that is what we've always wanted: the equal protection and equal recognition of all people.
So here's also a question, and I'm assuming that this is probably about if you go and find out about these services, does it include any fee that is charged?
No. So we don't charge any fees. We also have a WhatsApp line where you can actually drop us a WhatsApp, and then one of our trained legal advisors will actually get in touch with you and do a consultation with you telephonically if you are unable to come into the office. Otherwise, you're more than welcome to come into our offices. We are on 5 St. George's Mall. We are on the second floor. We have paralegals Monday to Friday that are there to service you 9 to 5 o'clock every day, and we provide free legal services, right? And I must just also mention that we have legal partners that we've partnered with on this campaign who have actually offered, some private lawyers charge, but there are a few law firms that have come together with us and collaborated with us who have offered their services at a reduced rate. So we also have a pamphlet that we are more than willing to share with you to distribute to your listeners, where they can actually see where they can actually go to get any assistance, because as I've said, we can't help everyone.
Yeah.
That's why it's also very important for us to also collaborate and find alternatives. They can also go to the legal aid office, right, where they will then, but the only hurdle with the legal aid is that they have to do a means test, and the household income must be lower than a particular number. I actually forgot how much it must be. So they'll first do the means test to see if you qualify to get the pro bono service or not. So there's legal aid, there's the Women's Legal Center, there's other law clinics around the country, like there's the UWC Law Clinic, there's the UCT Law Clinic, and there's also lawyers that are offering their services at a more reduced rate, just to ensure that women have access to courts. Yeah.
Okay, I hope that answers the question. And then moving on, Khensani, from your perspective, does this particular amendment finally bring a sense of justice and equality for Muslim women, or is there still a long way to go?
I would say yes and no. I mean, there has been quite a trend, and especially in Johannesburg, we've been getting queries from women in Johannesburg saying that they have approached the court for a divorce, but their husbands are telling them, I have granted you a talak, and as a result, you are not allowed to approach the courts. Let us just make it clear, whether your husband grants you a talak or not, you still have a right to go and institute legal divorce proceedings to ensure that there's a just and equal distribution of the assets, right? So that is very, very important, because in some instances from the women that we've interviewed, they have shared that they don't know how to even enforce the talak, right? Because some of these men don't even pay child maintenance, and so it is very important for women that even if your husband does grant you the talak, the court will still allow you to come and bring divorce proceedings. It's obviously not an easy process, but the family court system has been made to be as simplistic as possible. The clerks should be as helpful as possible.
Yeah.
So you can just even go there without seeking legal advice first and asking, what do I need to bring? What kind of assistance do I need? On the pamphlet that we've created, we have a section where we put the necessary documents that women can approach the court with, just to also just minimize the back and forth and save these women some money in the process. So we do have a list of documents that need to be brought to court, and they will simply assist you. But I must just say, it's not a straightforward route. In instances where it's obviously complicated and it would require our intervention, we will try and intervene where necessary. But it's important just for everyone to know that even though you were granted a talak, and I'm talking about people whose divorces have not been, so for example, the court order, the interim order had a date. Okay. It said that in 2022, the court said that if your divorce has not been finalized from December 2014 to date, you may approach the court, right? And now we actually have actual legislation. So if you maybe got the talak last night, you can actually go today to court and actually institute divorce proceedings. Yeah.
Attorney Khensani Motileni from the Women's Legal Center joins me in studio, and very interesting conversation about Muslim marriages and also the Divorce Amendment Act and what that entails. We have one question that came by our WhatsApp line. It reads that I am married according to Islamic rights, but also we got married in court. Does this safeguard me?
Yes. That actually safeguards you. So most people, because they understand the vulnerabilities around the non-recognition, they actually take it a step further and actually register their marriage in terms of the Marriage Act. So they would then, because in terms of the Marriage Act, if you don't have an antenuptial contract, you are married in community of property. But most importantly, you have a marriage certificate. Your marriage details are entered in the National Population Register. So should either spouse pass away, when you print a death certificate, certificate, it will say married. And that's something that's so important. Yeah.
Now, beyond the courtroom, Khensani, what kind of legal support and education does the WLC offer to women who are unsure of where to begin when facing discrimination or injustices?
So we number one is our law clinic, where women can come and seek our services either in person or via WhatsApp or via phone calls. The second one is that we are very big on community education and community capacitation workshops. We've recently had one in collaboration with ENS Africa in Mitchell's Plain, where we gathered a few paralegals in the area, as well as just like women in general, where we do community workshops. So if there is a community that would like us to come and spend a day with them and share this information, we are more than happy, more than willing to come and provide the information.
Mm-hmm. Now, statistics often reveal the reality behind these legal struggles. Maybe at this point you could share any figures or insights about the number of women affected or the kinds of cases you encounter most often.
Sure. It's quite a lot. And I mean, the first figure that we mentioned at the beginning of the show was that we had close to 800 women approaching the office from 1999 to 2014. So those numbers go higher and higher and higher. I think we do include the stats in our annual report. Yeah, we definitely do include the statistics in our annual reports, because also, and I must just add, we won't only assist people that are coming to talk to us about Muslim marriages. If you are facing gender-based violence and you would like to have a protection order, we are more than willing to assist you how to fill in the form, where to go, how to go about the process. If you are a woman working in an environment that does not favor you or you're facing discrimination, you can also still approach us, and then we can see how best to help you. So it's not just for Muslim marriages in particular, but it's any other legal issue that you might face that you need assistance with. And in some cases, these women just need counseling, right? So we have what we call a basket of care, where we partner with organizations like Mosaic, who then provide the counseling service for these women. So we recognize that you need a more multi-pronged approach, like a more holistic approach as
100%.
well to this. It's not just getting the recognition and it's done, but we also recognize that these women might need some counseling together with their children, because certain like, I mean, all life's experiences could be traumatic, right? So we recognize that, and that's why it's so important for us to partner with different organizations and stakeholders to ensure that we are able to give every woman that walks through our doors the best.
And I appreciate that the Women's Legal Centre offer an holistic approach to and go beyond the legal matters.
Yes.
And I mean, the trauma you speak about is so real, because the children also suffer from this, and the fact that you have that as well as an extended thing, a multi-pronged approach, as you said, it's really something that gives me hope, definitely. I also want to chat to you about those women who perhaps are listening right now and facing, whether it's a divorce or they have maintenance issues or even inheritance. How can they reach you? But more importantly, what should be the first steps to take?
The first step that I always tell people, get your documentation, like growing up, most of our mothers had a file. So that file is very, very important, because with everything, the court will consider evidence. So like your marriage certificate, even though it's in line, it's in terms of Islamic rights, that is proof that the wedding and the marriage actually exists. That is what you're actually that is the first document you're going to show them at the divorce court, that no, actually we got married in terms of Islamic rights. Here's the marriage certificates that we actually got. So keep your documentation. If you need to certify your documents. Now there's a new directive. Certified documents are now valid for 6 months at a time, just to ensure that people don't constantly go and certify, and because it's an expensive exercise as well. So just keep record of important things, names, dates, because those small details are what actually those are the merits that the court finally actually makes decisions on. So it's just, and I'm not saying that people should not be relaxed and happy in their marriages or relationships, but all I'm saying is that should you ever need anything, even if someone is harassing you on your cell phone, on your WhatsApp number, you can just take a screenshot and take it with you to the court and say you would like a protection order in terms of the Protection from Harassment Act. And that is the evidence that the court will then use to grant you the protection order, right? So evidence is very, very important, unfortunately. And we do recognize there are instances where you can't necessarily provide written proof of certain things, but also you can then present witnesses to say, Muniba was present when XYZ was happening. Please take her testimony into considerations. So there are those alternatives and ways around the exception to the general rule. We just have to just work together and find ways of coming together.
And you're more than welcome to contact the Women's Legal Centre for further details. The number for that is 021-424-5660. That's 021-424-5660. And you can also WhatsApp them at 079-421-8197. That's 079-421-8197. And I will surely leave these details at our reception desk. But you may also email the Legal Centre. It's info@wlce.co.za for more. Finally, what message do you think is important to leave with South African women about knowing their rights and standing up for them and seeking the legal support that they deserve?
I think the most important thing is that we're not going to stop fighting. Even now, we will fight until we have a framework that recognizes Muslim marriages. And I'm not talking about fighting in court, but we do it through our campaigns, such as what we're currently doing now. We do it through contributing to policy reform processes and actually bring the women's voice in together with our voice to say that there is an issue, please fix it. So I think the main thing is to just know that the law is supposed to protect all of us, and each and every person deserves legal certainty, no matter whether you find yourself in this world. And we are just here for these women. We will do our best. Where we can assist, we will definitely refer to credible lawyers that have integrity.
Now, once again, those details at 021-424-5660 for the Legal Centre. It's 424-5660, or you can WhatsApp them on 079-421-8197. Email info@wlce.co.za. Many thanks to the amazing team from the Women's Legal Centre for joining us today and for the powerful work that you continue to do in championing the justice and equality for women in South Africa. And to our listeners, remember that legal help is your right, not a privilege. If you or someone you know needs support, reach out to the organizations like